So, are you curious?
Welcome to the Curiosity Codex. I am your ardent enthusiast, Kyle Olson, and with me is my hapless cohort, Rob Cabasco.
Hello.
Hello. Let's keep talking Trek. All right, so on the menu today, we have a dish for the more modern eater. Many of you look at Trek and see the colorful jumpsuits, the dated effects, the stiff acting, and wonder what is the big deal. Where's the cursing? Where are the amazing visuals? Where is the sex?
Oh.
Where are the characters who have a memory for longer than 44 minutes? Well, I've got something on the menu that I think you'll like. However, this is nouveau cuisine. It's a wild combination of flavors that don't always work together, and the recipe keeps changing. But if you're willing to take some risks, it will really quench your appetite.
From 2017, it's Star Trek Discovery.
What a fantastic intro. And that is, okay, you can't undersell this enough. Not only is that spot on, but to me, I'm just going to say it. This is a show that I struggled with until the third season.
Agreed.
So it's Next Generation. Spoiler. Yeah. It is very similar to another Star Trek series because it really, I think the show is amazing where it hits. But to get to the third season, you got to get through the first two. So here we are.
Part of the problem is that it's still airing. So it's like all the rest of these are finished. They're a set story, like beginning, middle, end. But this one is still ongoing. So at the time of recording, we're getting ready for the fourth season to launch soon. So the third season has just finished airing-ish in the last couple months. So it's hard to know if it's going to get better. It seems to be getting better, but we honestly don't know. So the rest of us, you'll have to go along on the journey and figure it out. That's kind of one of the reasons why I kept it here at third, even though it's the most recent, is because we don't know. And the other thing is that it is the darkest of all of the Star Trek shows. Not only in content, but also in lighting. The first season is just really, really dark and hard to see it a lot of times. It's got sex, it's got violence, it's got conflict between characters, it's got layers and layers of secrets, and it's set in a very odd time. So the continuity can get a little wonky because they're doing modern stuff, but it's supposed to be set in a time when things weren't as high-tech and modern, and so it gets a little weird. But I know that you, as a new viewer, won't have this big problem, but it does get a little strange when they talk about things that are happening now that are sort of before any of the original series stuff, but yet they're much more technologically advanced. So it gets kind of funky. But let's talk about where we are in the timeline. So here we are in 2256. So as you've been following along, that means we're 100 years after the events of Enterprise, aka Star Trek Enterprise. So the Discovery takes place between the pilot of the original series and the first episode of the original series.
Wait, what?
You see what I mean? That's where things get a little wonky.
I did not even know that. Yes.
So what's happened since the time of Enterprise? Well, we've had a war with the Romulans. So that has all been off screen. So that's never been depicted anywhere else. It's just one of those things that they talk about as having happened. At the start of the show, the Klingons have been very, very quiet. They're aware they're out there, but they've not really had dealings with them. That'll change very quickly in the first episode, so I don't need to get into that. But let's just say that there has not been much dealings with the Klingons. The Federation is in full effect. So the Federation, like we talked about in the DS9 episode, is here, is strong, and Starfleet is out there. There's not a ton of ships out there, but there are a lot of them. Though obviously, as the shows go on, there'll be more and more. But there's a handful of ships, well, more than a handful, out there patrolling, doing their Starfleet kind of thing. Where things get a little rough is that this show departs from the things we've established as Star Trek as being, if not cornerstones or bedrock, at least the things that they have done on their show so far. The main character of the show is not the captain. It's actually the first. We're following the story of Star Trek Discovery is the story of Michael Burnham, of course, the thing, and not just on the Discovery, even though that's in the name of the title. So I guess they're kind of doing a double meaning thing, because
Right.
it's about her discovery of herself and watching her evolve and change and learn over the course of time. And that's never really been done in Star Trek. It's always been the ensemble. Like, it's always been like, there's Captain Kirk, there's Captain Picard, there's Captain Sisko, and then the people who are around them. But we've never really followed one character through different stages of their life before. It's sort of like, you got the impression on any of the shows they could kill that person if suddenly contract negotiations went wrong. They replaced with another one and the show would keep going. That would be a really hard sell with Discovery, because it's so much about the story of Michael Burnham. And that can be a positive and negative thing, because the other characters on the show are really, really fascinating. And so when they decide to make everything about Michael Burnham's journey, sometimes that can be annoying, because you kind of want to know what the other people are doing and what they're up to. And so a lot of that comes from the fact that it had a very difficult genesis. Brian Fuller was a writer for Star Trek. He had done a lot of stuff on Voyager, and then he left and then created Pushing Daisies, and then he created Hannibal. Like, he became a very celebrated show creator, runner. He was brought in to create what became Star Trek Discovery. And so he had a lot of ideas and plans and things he wanted to do, and then he got fired. It's a little more complicated than that, but essentially it didn't work out creatively, and he had to step away, and other people stepped in. There's a whole thing with American Gods, which would be a whole nother episode in and of itself, about the rise and fall of that show, which has been recently canceled. It was a whole thing. So once he left the show, then all the stuff he had been planning and setting up were sort of left there. And so it took another group of creative people who had been involved to sort of pick up the mantle and go, and the show then changed directions. And so then they finished out season 1, and then season 2 came in, and another group of creative people took over, and they took it in another direction. And then season 3 came in, and I think you get the idea of what's happening. So there's been a bit of creative whiplash, because Star Trek Discovery is an ongoing story, as opposed to the other ones we talked about, which were episodic, procedural. This is one story being told over multiple episodes. Now, the meta plot, it's sort of closer, I guess, to the X-Files, that there is a major plot going on and then minor plot. So sometimes the major plot is not a major focus of the episode. So if it's a war with a particular race or a quest, whatever it is, sometimes that'll be in the background, and then whatever the alien du jour will be the main focus, and then but it goes back and forth. But there's always a runner, there's always a through line, and the characters have memory, and they will talk about things that happened to them in seasons ago, years ago. Like, they actually have a long memory, and they will remember things that happened to them. It's sort of like a really well-written role-playing game where the thing will pop up on screen that Tilly will remember that. Like, it's the same kind of thing. Like, actions have consequences in Discovery. It is really, really now. It is very much of today. It is 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. Like, it is very much in the loam of what's going on, because it is the most progressive of all the Star Trek shows. There is more diversity on this show than in any other Star Trek show. There are more women on this show. There are more LGBTQ characters on this show than in any Star Trek thing before. And they are front and center, and they are not made to be othered.
Oh, right.
It is just part of the show. It is built into the DNA. Now, like I said, as things change, like, some of the characters are there, I say this is probably I didn't write down all the characters' names, but the helmswoman is this very striking black woman with long braids, but she doesn't get a character name until like midway through the second season. So they won the push pull. This is the same kind of thing. Like, by the time they get to season 3, they are firing on all cylinders, but it does take them a while to get up and going. But they actually should be applauded for the effort, because they have done a really, really good job of putting these things front and center and not making it a political show. So it's like everything that happens is not specifically about what's going on now, and yet it kind of is. So it is a show that is constantly in development, is constantly getting better, which is another thing too. It does have its issues with trying to fit into a very odd time. So I guess we can talk about this today. So there was originally a pilot shot for the original series, and we're going to talk about the original series coming up here in a future episode. And then they didn't like it, so they did something else, and so they actually had the first episode. Well, this entire series takes place between those two things. And that can get a little weird because a lot of the stuff that's happening here predates the 1960s show. So they seem to have more advanced technology than we had seen in the other one. I don't exactly know why they decided to put it here. I guess it's because they wanted to take one of the most famous characters on all of Star Trek and put him into the show. And that, of course, is Spock. So Spock is in the show as a young man. So he is a part of the show. It predates any of the stuff we have seen. So he is young Spock, and he is not quite the same Spock that we've seen in other stuff before.
Okay, so here's a couple things, you know, and you've already heard me say this, the third season, I'm going to tell you something. I thought the third season was one of the greatest seasons I've seen of recent television.
I agree. And the second season is also an amazing piece of work.
The third season I loved, but yes, I would agree. First season's a little wonky, so just FYI, there's and you have options. You could go watch a summary of season 1 and then dive into season 2. I mean, like,
I don't know. I guess we'll
talk about that.
I would say
here's my point, though, I want to make, though, about right off the bat. So if you understand where this show is placed, the producers of this show had a decision to make. And they caught a lot of heat for it. First of all, this show is the victim of, how do we say this? The mid 2010s was a really rambunctious time for nerd property development. And hear me out when I say this. Between this, Rogue One, the Zack Snyder and the DC expanded universe, there was a lot of crazy things that happened in the middle of production. Solo, you could go down the list, right?
Yeah. Oh,
where
right.
People
that's good.
where a lot of money had been spent on developing stuff. And in the middle of development, people just went, yeah, this isn't working. We're going to start over, but hold everything. We're going to figure this out. That's kind of what happened. So the first season is a little bit like, I'm trying to figure it out, right? Now, but here's the other issue is like, okay, if you know Star Trek, if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, I know Star Trek. I know enough about the original series, the movies, Next Generation, and some other stuff, right? Why, if this takes place before the original series, why does it look like the Kelvin timeline? And that's the bottom line. And the point, the 2 points I would make to you on this is, if you're at all familiar with Star Trek, there is a great difference between the Next Generation and the Next Generation movies. Because what happened in the Next Generation movies is they got rid of of 2/3 of the lights in the Enterprise. Now, why did they do that? There's no practical reason they did it. They did it because movies look like movies and TV shows look like TV shows.
Yeah.
Into
shadows
and drama and cinematic lighting, right? No, here's the deal.
Right.
They had a decision to make. When we are making the show that is set where it's set, do we make all the super Trek nerds happy and at the same time isolate a lot of new people? Because a lot of new people go, I don't want to watch something that looks like it was made in a garage. Or do we just kind of blur the lines and do we make something that just looks killer? That's what they did. They wanted to make something that looks killer. And how do I prove this? Because at the time we're recording this, there is another show that's in development that is going to take place again in the old series era by one of the characters. And they've already announced, yeah, that show is going to look more like the original series. Why? Because we can, and it makes sense because we know the audience for that show. There's no practical reason. There's no reason like, oh, in the timeline, a library burned down and they lost all the plans for everything. No, that's not what happened.
A time traveler came
no,
back
that's not what happens, right? A comet doesn't wipe out like an industry planet and then they lose all the blueprints. No.
That has
already happened. That's season 3. But I will say, like, that's the reason. So don't get too much like, look, if you're going to get into this and say, well, how come this doesn't look like this 1960s Enterprise? What's going on here? And then there's a ship that shows up that, and it is, right? And it doesn't look like that. Why?
Yeah.
Check your brain at the door.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing is I keep bringing this up, even though I know this is designed for new viewers. But because it is an ongoing thing with this show for the first, I'd say 2 seasons. By the time they get to season 3, none of it matters.
Exactly.
Like, basically, they have figured it out, they've ironed it out, and it's fine. But it does become a thing in this one, and specifically in season 2, they go back and they reference the original unaired pilot for the original series of Star Trek. So much so they even actually show clips from it. and then they have recast the actors from that, but you're supposed to just go, okay, great. So as much as they're like, it's all about new people, like new audiences, we don't want to get tied down continuity. Well, you directly referenced a super obscure episode. You recast the people who are in it and expect everybody to go, yeah, okay.
You know, I'm sure.
And so it gets a little
It's
wonky.
okay. So here's the deal. I don't check your brain at the door because Star Trek, let's be fair. We've already said this. It is a show that requires your brain. Don't check your continuity at the door. Check your sensibilities at the door.
Just accept the fact that they're trying to do something and go along for the ride, because you could drive yourself crazy by trying to like map out where everything is, and people have.
Correct. Oh, yes.
So that's the but so at the bottom line of all this is it is worth the trip. Like you, at the first, as you start this out, you're gonna go, this is Star Trek, because like I said, people are swearing on screen. There is. It's PG level, but it's still nudity. There is, adult content like in the show. People are pretty brutally murdered. Like, I mean, it's like they're like, oh, we're on streaming now, so we can do whatever you want. Well, just because you can doesn't mean you should, but they do, and so you have to get it. So it is a show that is veering between newly widened lanes of tone, trying to find out where it goes. And I can tell you, it does find its lane.
Oh, yes.
But it's just like in a driving game, it's trying to find the line, and eventually they do find the line. And once they get it, they're going strong. And to say, the characters are consistently well written, and the acting is consistently good too. So that's another thing. When we talk about some of the other series, even there's some wonky stuff in Deep Space Nine and in Enterprise too. Like there are very broad stereotypes at the beginning, and then they sort of become nuanced characters. They are fully nuanced, interesting characters from the start of Discovery. You just discover more layers of them as they go, and also how they relate to each other. And there are characters who are specifically set up to be pissy, antagonistic, irascible, that kind of thing, and you get to understand why they are that way, and they eventually grow and learn and change, and that as it goes along. And there's characters that I was at the beginning, I was like, ugh, this freaking guy, and now I'm like, I hope he never leaves the show. I mean, there's some fantastic stuff, and the nice thing about having the main character not be the captain is we get captains. So you over the course of this, we've had like 3 or 4 different captains. So you get to see how our main character, Michael, interacts with them in different ways, and how their command structure is different. I say, actually, as I'm thinking in my head, there's even more than 4. You get to see her learning about power by seeing how these captains deal with their crew and situations and other people and that. So that's been an interesting journey too. And like I said, the journey is still continuing. So there also is there's things I want to talk about, but I don't want to spoil it for you, because there are so many fun things that happen over the course of it that I want to get into. There's some really, really stellar actors that you would not expect to be in a Star Trek thing that show up in this, and they give me so much joy. So I want to spread that joy to you, and I don't want to deprive you of the experience of it. So Star Trek Discovery is currently only available on Paramount Plus, or I believe you can buy the Blu-ray. Oh, actually, no, you can buy some of them on digital. So there's multiple ways to get to it, and I highly, highly recommend it. And you definitely 1000% need to watch the first episode, because if anything that we've been teaching you is that the first episodes of Star Trek are super important for every series. Never skip the pilot.
Okay, strike what I said earlier. Yes, on that part, you're correct.
Yeah.
The first episode, you have to understand what sets everything up.
Yes. And a lot of times, I can almost guarantee, if there's something that annoys you about the show, they're gonna fix it.
Oh, yeah.
Because at the beginning, there was a lot of nerd debate and ruffled feathers, and even Rob and I were like, oh God, I'm so tired of plotline X, and like, 6 episodes later, plotline X is gone. And you go, and now you kind of go, I wonder if they're going to bring plotline X back. Like, no, we moved on from that. We're doing something different. So that is my third recommendation for this. If you want something new and modern and different, and you're willing to let them grow and change, then Star Trek Discovery is the meal I recommend for you.
Can I add? Oh, no, I just want to add this about this. Is I agree with everything, and one of the things that I think you said that I had not considered until just now.
Yeah,
the show is interestingly titled because although the ship is the Discovery, which is not, I mean, you know, from the very beginning, it's not the main ship in the first episode or so, right? But you're right. It's the title is not really just the ship. It is really about the journey. Mm-hmm. And I can't stress that enough because the third season is just so spectacular, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That you want to see it. And where it goes, it may not always be the Discovery.
Right. Yeah.
It may not. I mean,
the show that you think it is at the beginning, like even in the first episode or in the first couple episodes of season 1, is not the show that it is by the end of the third season.
Oh, no.
You know? Would you agree with that? I mean,
I would totally agree.
We're specifically not giving it away. But at the same time, it is.
And I'll tell you this. You know what? To really get the story, one of the neat things, if you're listening to this and you're like, I haven't seen any of this, well, you're in luck because this show probably will make more sense binging it.
Yes.
Because because literally there'll be less time between arcs, and you'll get through it.
They do cliffhangers.
Yes.
This is something that Star Trek is not usually used to doing. So they'll get to the end of the episode and you'll want to know what happens next because now, not always, but there's enough of them that you go, wait, what does that mean? And you want to jump right into the next episode.
I will just say this. The third season, I have such love for it, but also too, you're going to watch this because there is, not only is there a connection to traditional Star Trek lore, you have a phenomenal new character that is part of a new race of characters we have not seen before. That is fantastic.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, we haven't singled out any characters because I kind of wanted you to experience them, but I have to say, Doug Jones.
And here's the other big thing. If you're like, I don't know, do I need to watch more ships going around at warp speed? Not to ruin anything, but there's something else other than warp speed. Yeah. And when you see that, it changes a lot of how the show works. So please, yes.
And if you are a old school Rent head from the 90s, 2 of the original members of Rent are in this show. 2. And if that's not a selling point, I don't know what is. But I can see that many of you are confused, annoyed, and don't like you see on your plate. It's too wild, too new, too different. You're looking for something comfortable, familiar, consistent. And that is absolutely valid. Sometimes you need the tried and true menu items, and I've got a choice for you that I think you're going to really enjoy. And we'll talk about that next time. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for next episode to drop, go do something nice for yourself. Thanks so much for listening. This has been the next chapter in the Curiosity Codex, but there are still many pages left to decipher. We're part of the True Story FM family of podcasts. Find out more about us at truestory.fm. Our theme music is Intrusion by Severed Personality, aka Kevin MacLeod. The voice of the Codex is Vicky Hall. Find her on the web at vickyhall.squarespace.com. My co-host is Rob Cabasco. Find him with me on the Marvel Movie Minute podcast. And my name is Kyle Olson.
The Codex is closed. For now.